If you're the biggest fish in your pond, and you need to find a new pond,
Right.
Because you're not going to grow. You're not going to, you're not going to be pushed, And I think at any point, if you're kind of satisfied with like where you're at, then it's like, man, like it's time to be like, hey, am I as good as I think I am?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, why don't you go find out?
Yeah.
Like why don't you put your money where your mouth is and then go see how good you are.
For me, but it's also
Guard, I'm like, no.
you're a saint. The Doing the Work podcast is brought to you by some amazing sponsors who we're very grateful for that allow us to do this amazing podcast that brings you information that helps you to be more connected and be more healthy and helps you grow in your life. Here's the thing that a lot of people don't know about fitness and strength and conditioning. They think that the harder you work in the gym, the more you crush yourself, the more weight you're lifting, the faster you go, the better you're going to get. And actually, that doesn't follow science. What follows science is that when you are in the gym or you're doing your training, you're actually breaking down, which means that you're dipping below where you were before. You're essentially causing trauma to your body. And the only way that we actually get better is to compensate for that breakdown and to recover better. So that's what Strive Human Optimization is all about. It's about helping you to recover better and more effectively so that you can continue to train hard and you can continue to get better, in whether that be in your strength training or your endurance training or just your general wellness. They've got things like cold plunges, infrared saunas, compression therapy, and a lot more that's going to help you to continue to make progress in and outside of the gym. So if you're interested in that, check them out at www.shobashdrop.com. That's www.shobashdrop.com. All right, welcome to Doing the Work podcast. I'm here with Jake Saenz. Jake, you have been someone who has absolutely inspired me. While I've been living here in Austin on military orders, I've gotten the opportunity to work out at your gym. Mm-hmm. But even before that, I've looked at your brand. I've looked at it. You're the owner of Atomic Athlete. I've looked at how your gym operates, and it's really just been super inspirational to me. So this is just a great opportunity for me to get to pick your brain a little bit, kind of see what you're all about and really highlight what you're doing. So thank you for being on the show.
I'm glad to be here, man. Appreciate it.
So when you introduce yourself, like when you tell people what you do for a living, like how do you introduce yourself?
It's funny. I mean, you own a gym at some point. So I think when you start a business, at first you're excited and then you're very eager to talk about it. And then once you've kind of become established, then people now they say like, oh, what do you do? It's like, I own a gym. And that's I just kind of leave it at that.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, really? Like what kind of gym? I go, strength and conditioning gym. And so I kind of force them to really dig if they really want to talk about it. Cause I think at a certain point, once your business kind of becomes successful, you don't want the business to really define you. You kind of want to like have that's work. And then like, if you want to know about me, ask me personal questions, not about my job.
Yes.
So oftentimes like if I talk to someone, I go like, oh, what do you do? Like, oh, I do this. I go, no, like, I don't care what you do for money. Like what do you do? What's your thing? That's going to tell me a little more about who you are than, oh, I'm in software sales or whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell me anything about you. Shy of maybe how much money you make, but I'd much rather find out like what drives you, what pushes you forward. So
yeah, identity is such a big thing. There was a period of time when I had a lot of pride in being a gym owner. Mm-hmm. Like I kind of like, I carried that around like kind of like a badge. And similar, you and I have, you have a military background.
Yes.
You were in Ranger Regiment. And so that identity you kind of carry around a little bit. And
I'd equate it to like when you first get your Ranger tab, for example.
Yeah.
You kind of want people to know.
Right.
Right. But then here you are, 20 years later, they say, oh, you're in the military. I was like, yeah, I was in the military. Like, what did you do? I was like, I was infantry.
Yeah.
Like, oh, really? Where were you stationed at? Like, Fort Benning. Like you really don't, like, it's not like something you're really eager to express and talk about it because you've done that in your younger days, and that was a real big accomplishment for you at that time. And now you're just kind of like, I mean, like both of us are older guys now. It's not like we're hard hitting young 20-year-olds, So
Definitely not.
yeah, so it's I think that's how it's kind of an evolution of any business. Like once the business is established and successful, then you just kind of, I just usually just give them like, yeah, I'm in a gym. Like, oh, what do you like to do? I like to go bow hunt, and then and just kind of have more casual conversations than kind of throw them the whole sales pitch right off the bat.
Right. Well, one of the things I love about Atomic Athlete, and one of the reasons why I even came here, I've been in the industry for like 24 years, and having the experience that I have, I chose to come here largely because of the culture that you guys have created. And in fact, when I first started here, you guys sent out an email about culture. And, when you have a gym, it's not just like a place where people come work out, but it's a community. And you guys clearly take that really seriously and have put a lot into the culture aspect of it.
Yeah, I think, when we send out, like we said, we did like a review earlier, not a review, but like a survey about like, hey, why do you train at the gym? This and that. And programming and both community were both kind of the really, really most obvious aspects, based on the surveys and why people train here. And I think that, programming honestly is lost on a lot of people, like the complexity of it. Like you can look at our programming because you're a gym owner and experienced strength and conditioning coach and understand what's going on. I think the average person just looks at it and they're going to make their decision on that training session based on how they feel afterwards. Like how hard was it? Right. And if it's like extremely hard, they're like, oh, like that was a great session just because I'm so smoked. And even my fiance kind of falls in this category right now where she likes the ones that really break her, even though it's by the definition of traditional strength and conditioning programming. It's like, well, that really wasn't a good session. That was just a hard session,
Right.
And so I do think that like community is one of those things that we could probably have pretty shitty programming and most people probably wouldn't notice. But they'd still, like long as we coached it the same way, long as the community was the same, as the gym was the same, I think our experienced athletes who have an athletic background, maybe a background in competitive sports or something like that would be like, hey, what are we doing and why? But I think the average Joe coming into the gym wouldn't know the difference. And it could still be the gym that it is with that less trained eye with shitty programming.
Right. Yeah. I like to say that, you can have you can have either the shittiest equipment ever or the best equipment ever.
Yes.
You can have the best programming or the shittiest programming ever. And it really wouldn't have a lot of impact on how successful your gym and your business is.
Yeah.
If your coaching and your culture is on point.
Yes. Yeah. I think, and I don't want to, poo-poo on CrossFit. But I think that's one of the things, right? So the nature of the experience, like what you experience that day has a lot to influence the end user. And they're going to they don't look at it from a big picture perspective, like you would investing or something like that. They're looking at it like that day, that session, how do I feel afterwards? And whatever in their mind is going to equal like, hey, what determines success in today's training session? Did I move, one step closer to my ultimate goal, which will take, 2 or 3 years?
Right.
That's kind of more the mindset that we have. A lot of people will come in, military guys, especially younger athletes who can handle high volumes and really motivate and want to train hard. They're hitting that like, how do I feel right now at this minute? How hard was that? The harder, the better. And that really goes against, any of the science that's out there. It's like there's a difference between training and assessing. And then I think there's this big muddled, convoluted perspective of like mental toughness and training to where now people, they want to come in and even if something doesn't feel right or something hurts, they're like, well, I'm going to be David Goggins and whoever, and I'm going to push through the pain, and they're not listening to their body. And I think if you get too wrapped up in that whole mental toughness game, which is important, it's definitely important, but the mind is a very separate entity from the body. And you could have, I always use the analogy of a car and driver. You can have a really motivated driver, right? But the car, the wheels can start falling off, and the motivated driver is going to keep driving it really hard. And eventually the wheel's going to fall off completely and you can't go anywhere.
Right.
And that happens to a lot of athletes who are really motivated to train. They ignore the pain. They're trying to be mentally tough. And we have to understand that these two systems are separate, like our conscious mind, like the driver, is very different than the car he's driving. And they're two separate things. They should be trained separately, developed individually. And some people are already mentally tough and they don't need to develop that side. They need to really develop the physiological side.
Right.
And then vice versa. Some people have all the genetics. We were talking about this earlier, good genetics. They have all the raw materials to be extremely successful, but they're mentally weak.
Right.
And so like that athlete needs to really work on mental toughness, for example.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up David Goggins because he's more of a popular figure these days. Yeah. He comes from a similar background as you and I do. And I'm always torn on, his message. Like, it's certainly, like I said, like there's a lot to be said about being mentally tough and pushing your limits or pushing past your limits. I mean, he has that whole 40% thing where most of us are only operating about 40% of our full thing. But I'm also, for like your average Joe, for your person who isn't like trying to accomplish a particular, like a military aspiration or something like that.
Yep.
I'm always torn about like how like if his message is is landing appropriately.
Yeah. I mean, I think someone like him and like, I mean, I've watched him. To me, he's a little over the top, but I think also, I mean, America and media and social media and like all that stuff is a little over the top to begin with.
Sure.
The most popular shows are over the top. The news headlines are over the top. And I think one thing he is doing is he's motivating people to train. And so that's a good thing. So people are getting out there, people who I would say are normally probably very mentally weak and not motivated are getting motivated because of him. That's a good thing, I would say. The people who are taking like everything to heart and maybe pushing beyond their limits, there's a time and place to push beyond your limits, races like the Leadville 100. If you're racing Kona, in the Ironman kind of circuit, like those are times and places where like, hey, like you have to lay it all on the line, take it to the red, push your limits. Military selections, for example, same thing. But I think for like the average person who embarks upon like, hey, I want to be stronger, faster, more resilient, you can watch those videos, take it to heart, and you could go hurt yourself pretty severely, And so I think you have to be mindful, still have a big picture perspective on those kinds of things.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that the science is clear. Where the public and where it really takes like a talented coach or a knowledgeable programmer or something like that, which I think you guys do an amazing job at, is that people think the public is more is better. I'm gonna grind it out. I'm gonna push myself to my limits. But the science is pretty clear that you break down while you're training, and you only get better in the recovery / rest phase of it. And people don't really know that.
Yeah, I think so. We're in like a time period of information at any given point. You could ask me the most strange, random question, trivial fact, and I can find the answer probably within 30 seconds on my phone, right? So we have all of this information accessible, which is amazing. Like, I mean, anything pops up, you're like, well, I can find the answer right now if I have access to a phone. But then we're also on the other side, because those platforms exist. Now you have people who can influence you. And these influencers, they may be great athletes. And I've been to seminars before where the athletes were exceptional, but they were also coaches. And then when you talk to them, how many coaches you have, how many athletes do you have? And they say, oh, I had like 7. And I'm like, you coach 7 people and you consider yourself qualified enough to teach a seminar on how to coach people how to do these things. It's like, at the time, I was running a small strength and conditioning gym with 200 athletes, So it was like, should I even listen to you? I mean, you're obviously a phenomenal athlete. You're on the competitive, weightlifting or powerlifting circuits, and you're very strong. But that really doesn't translate to you being a knowledgeable or good coach.
Right. Totally different.
And so these influencers are, whether they look really good, whether they're able to do something amazing online, doesn't mean you should listen to them, because for every person who has done like A, B, and C and is successful, there's probably 10 that did it and were unsuccessful. You just never hear about them.
Right.
And so you have these few individuals slip through the cracks, become very successful, become very influential, and then people will listen to what they say, and it's like, well, I mean, yeah, you look great and you can do this, but like, is what you're doing going to work for me or for that guy over there or for that woman over there?
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the real. I think that's real art. It's like figuring out what's the base. I think like what in terms of like a rule of engagement, you want the minimum amount of force that's going to get you the result. You don't want to try and jump right to like the maximum amount of force.
Exactly. Like when it comes to least in the training world, it's all big picture. You look at the world's best endurance coaches. They're looking at their athletes' development over years. Same thing with weightlifting programs, powerlifting programs. They're not looking at what we did today or this week. They're looking at like, okay, hey, this year we did this. Next year we plan on doing this. The year after we plan on doing this. And like that's how world champions, along with great genetics,
right,
are built. Like really high quality coaching, and then athletes who have exceptional potential.
Yeah, playing the long game.
Yeah, playing the long game. I think I read a book the other day. I was reading a book, I should say. I didn't finish it. And it was Arthur Liddard, I believe. And he was a New Zealand running coach and trained Olympians, national level, world level, Olympic level. And he said one of the biggest things that you're doing wrong to youth is making them race in high school and middle school. Obviously football in Texas is very competitive. Cross country is competitive. Track is competitive. And he said all these athletes would do so much better if they didn't race in this time period and just continue to develop and train and build their base. And then by the time they're 20, they have the prerequisite, conditioning to actually still go out and see what they're truly capable of. But because they're win from 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, trying to get them into that college slot, that you're actually applying the wrong strategy to develop them as a true athlete for the short-term success that you'll see as a high school coach.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, right, like the competitive battleground can be a place where some people thrive, but in particular, young people have, you know what I mean? When they're like hammering themselves that hard at that young of an age, there's like a whole thing about, we all know people like that who like, basically they were like the high school stud.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you never heard of them again after that.
Yeah. Which is interesting. It brings up something I didn't know until recently is that a lot of parents are holding their kids back in school. If they're on that cusp of like, hey, like, should he start kindergarten this year or next year? It's like, oh, well, if we wait, he's going to be 10, 11 months ahead of his peers.
Oh, interesting.
And he'll be that much bigger than his peers. He'll do that much better in sports. I mean, just think of what 1 year of puberty and testosterone does to a young man in 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. If I would have been as strong and as fast as I was in 9th grade and 8th grade, like my experience would have been totally different, like probably in life and definitely in sports. And I didn't know that was a thing where like, individuals who are into the field sports, the baseball, football, basketball, and they're really, really kind of obsessed with how well their children are doing, that they're actually kind of like, oh, if I can hold him back one more year, then when he goes into kindergarten, he's the older kid, he's the bigger kid, he's the stronger kid. And come like middle school and high school, like he's 1 year ahead, of his peers. And so now he's going to be making varsity as a freshman, versus JV and all these things. And like, I didn't even know this was a thing.
Yeah. I mean, that certainly wasn't a thing in my family.
No, he's like, I send him to school.
Yeah, I joke all the time. Like, exactly. Like, I was like, as soon as my mom could send me to school, she sent me. So I was like 4 years old in kindergarten. And the way that turned out was like, I graduated high school when I was 17.
Me too.
And I went to the Army.
Yep.
And
couldn't even sign up for the Army.
Right. My mom had to sign.
Yeah,
right. Exactly. My mom had to sign the paperwork for me. But I was a decent enough athlete, but I was never like, I was like middle of the pack because I was smaller. I was weaker. I was still working on coordination and stuff. And I joke with people all the time. Like my first year in the Army was crazy. Like I grew like 6 inches.
Yeah.
I put on like 35 pounds.
Yep.
Because I finally became more grown.
More of a man, yeah.
So if that was my senior year of high school.
Yes. I mean, just think like everything. I mean, think how much like your success in sports and athleticism and confidence has to do with how strong you are. Right. And how big you are compared to other males. Like it's such an influential, I think, aspect. I was the same way. Right. So it was like, I showed up my freshman year and it was like, I couldn't go to driver's ed. It was like, I'm not old enough to go to driver's ed yet,
Right.
And like, you graduate when you're 17, not 18. And I just think like, what if I would have shown up as a freshman into a small town in Texas, moving from California a year later? Like how different my freshman year experience would have been.
Yeah.
How much more successful I could have been in social circles and like with females and then my peer group. And every year, I think I had a great kind of, I would say mentor, but he was a coach. And so I came from California to small town Texas. Never done anything, played some soccer. And so basically all what I would call like the ocho sports, or the sports that are less popular in small town Texas, golf, tennis, soccer, right? They all went to this one class that was called athletic conditioning. And we had the football strength and conditioning coach ran it, because basketball, baseball, football had their own period where like the whole team went and trained together. And he ran the class like a strength and conditioning program. It was amazing. Like for day one, like sprint assessment, mile assessment, 1 rep maxes, you get a power rating. I remember being like a freshman from California, never touched a barbell, and a sophomore cheerleader had a higher power rating than me. And so of course some tennis douchebag is making fun of me, as a year older than me. And that kind of drove me into like, I want to train and train more consistently. And so like, I think my freshman bench press was like 95 pounds. Right. And by the time I was a senior, after powerlifting and training, I could bench press 315 for 2.
Wow.
And I can't do that now.
Yeah.
My shoulders are definitely not there. But like, talking about a 2 times body weight, I was powerlifting the 148s and the 155s. And so you just look at that spread. That's a huge gap in a 4-year window. And the question I have is like, what if I would have rolled in as a freshman? Like, what would I have been capable of?
Right. Yeah, you mentioned identity earlier, and this kind of like brings it. So what is it that? So you went into the military right out of high school, is that right? Yeah, and then you did that. But what brought you back to the strength and conditioning? Like, what about that lifestyle and that profession, drew you in?
Like, so I was a typical boy. I was, very into Transformers, G.I. Joes, like watching Rambo, Terminator. Like I was very into just like masculine things. It's 2022, so it's a little different than it was like in 1986, 87,
right.
88, right? So I was very into all that stuff. And pretty much I think like sometime middle of high school, I was like, I want to go to the military, and did the military thing. And then I got back and I was like, okay, well, hey, like, now it's time for college. I did that, checked that box, did some cool stuff. Let's go to college. And then went and got a degree in business. But then one thing I recognized very quickly was when I got out and I was looking for jobs, like all through business school, it was like your presentations were done in slacks and, shirt tucked in, belt, button down tie, like I would show up and, to school with flip-flops, shorts, and a t-shirt and have like a garment bag. I have to go change in the bathroom before I give my presentation, then change right back out. I just hated everything about it.
Yeah.
So as I was looking for jobs, I recognized that like, okay, hey, well, most of my experience at this point is in service industry, like bar and restaurant. That's what I was doing all through college. And it was training. So it's like, well, if I have to do a career or pursue a career in something that I've experienced in, those are the 2 things I've experienced in. And so I kind of, just kind of tried it out, started a training group, like reached out to some people. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and kind of reverted back. And at that point, there was not much structure. There was not much planning. There was not had a base in programming, science and knowledge. I just kind of come up with just basic hard workouts to start,
Right.
Like most of us do at some point.
Yeah, that's how it was for me when I was
We're going to go until someone throws up,
Yeah.
and but I was always a guy in the military that asked why a lot, which none of my, upper enlisted and leadership liked. But I started asking myself why are we doing this? So I pursued, educating myself, seminars, did the CSCS, and that's like a great book, great certification. But then I think, ultimately what it came down to was over the past 10, 11 years, you get the formal education, but then you also get hands-on experience and you see what works and what doesn't work. And it's easy to watch some cool videos online from powerlifters talking about this, and that. But when you get into a normal gym and you have a bunch of 32, 33-year-olds and they're all hurting their backs, you're like, well, maybe that isn't the right thing, And so I think there's always a balance of taking with the guys who are really good at something or preaching and kind of saying, and then balancing that with actual real world experience. So I think coaching is kind of like the front line of the industry where, a scientist may say one thing, like, well, let's actually see if that holds true.
Yeah, it's I say that all the time. It's like really where the science is really being created and tested is in places like Atomic. People are getting creative. They're adapting things that they learned from the science, but trying, and so like the academics are always going to be a year to maybe 3, 4, 5 years behind what the actual science is pushing.
Yes, it just validates what we're already doing,
right?
More times than not. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, so shifting gears slightly, but this is something that's very interesting to me, that I have leveraged my military career. I took what I learned there and I got out and I applied it to my civilian life, to basically everything. There's a thread of my military background that kind of goes through everything. And I'm curious about that for you. Are there things that you took from your military experience? Are there I don't want to lead you at all, but I do have some experience with like my personal experience. I'm just curious for you, what about your military background still applies today?
I think one thing is that really held true for me in the military, especially being like a junior enlisted guy in a special operations unit, was there was a lot of talk about what you should do, but then it was like, well, I can outperform you. It's like this is very confusing to me how you're saying like I need to do this, and that. When it's like, I just outscored you on a physical assessment, and yes, you may have gone to school before me or whatever it may be. And so like for me, I think that idea, it was like, this is something I don't want to take forward with me. I don't want to like kind of rely or rest on my laurels, I think would be the term, right?
Right.
So where it's like, hey, I did this 20 years ago. And so like, you should respect me because of this, or 10 years ago or 2 years ago, whatever it may be, And so, to me, it kind of holds me to a higher standard, even being 41 now. Like we were running the other day and there was, Cody, one of our coaches, who's in his 20s, and there's a SEAL officer candidate running as well. And we get to the bottom of the hill and I literally look at him and I say, you're gonna let a 41-year-old man beat both you two? And then it was on,
Right.
And so I don't want them to, I don't want to expect respect because I own the gym.
Yeah.
I want to earn that respect every day, by either, doing the work no one wants to do, by putting out the effort no one wants to put out, and then, by leading from the front. I mean, that's a common thing you hear a lot in the military.
Set the example.
Yeah, set the example, and honestly, like me and you now, we're in our 40s, so we're on the decline.
Right.
We're not going to be able to continue to hang and punish 20-year-olds for very much longer. So, but you know what? It's like, even if it's 5 years from now and there is that stud out there, it's like, I'm going to make him earn it at least a round or two, and I'm going to give him the right effort, the same kind of effort that I would expect from our athletes, So
yeah,
that to me is a big thing, because I saw so many guys. Some guys were amazing. Some guys were amazing leaders, and they led from the front, and they were humble and quiet professionals the entire time. And then other guys were just rely upon what they did at one point.
Right.
It's like hearing like high school football glory stories from guys who are like 40. You're like, dude, who cares?
Right.
Like, look at you now,
Right.
And so that's what like Paul Howe has a great motto for his training company. It's like, selection's a never ending process. Like you're always testing yourself. So I think me and you are probably very similar in mindset, where sometimes you wake up and you're like, dude, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I have zero desire to go out there and do sandbag get-ups and this and that. But it's like, if I'm going to make 300 people do it that day, and I'm not going to do it because I don't want to do it, like, what does that say about me as a leader, So
yeah, and I say that a lot. Not only I say that in regard to my athletes, but to my coaches. I will never ask you to do something that I'm not willing to do myself, and not like something I have not something I have done before.
Yes.
But meaning, like, if you need to show up and do that today, I'm going to be willing to show up and do it today also. And that means, and attacking that with a great attitude and with the amount of effort that it deserves.
I mean, like I don't want to wake up at 5 a.m. and come and coach at 6 a.m. I don't have to very often anymore, but it's like, hey, like I have like my athletes doing my programming or coming into my facility, and they're doing it. Like I can wake up a couple of times a week, or if a coach is out of town traveling, one of the newer coaches, no big deal.
Yeah.
Like you own the gym, you make your own schedule. You're your own boss. It's like, it's a privilege to wake up and actually get in there and work with those athletes that day. Cause it also, like, when you own a gym, the senior coaches are typically the best coaches. They have the most experience. We have, I'd say 3 really senior full-time coaches here at this facility. all owner operators. And then our other coaches are also pretty experienced, at least 5 years or more training, but they don't do it full time. So it's not like all day, every day they're thinking of like the programming, how the gym runs. For them, it's like a kind of a cool organization to be a part of. They get a free membership. They get to train there. They get paid to coach. They enjoy it, but it's not their livelihood and their life. And so it's good to also put those coaches, like the experienced coaches, back in front of those athletes in those classes that most experienced coaches don't want to coach.
Right.
So they get that like kind of treat of like, hey, Jordan's coaching today, or Todd's coaching today, or Jake is coaching today. Even normally they get like the most junior coach because it's 6 a.m. And although they're great coaches, there is a difference between someone who's coached for a year or two versus coached, 10, 11, 12 years.
I mean, there's no replacement for somebody who's kind of just witnessed and observed so many different situations and so many different scenarios and so many different, conditions. You can't read that in a book. Yeah. You can't watch it on a YouTube video. You got to just kind of live it.
People always, I'll say, oh, you got new shoes. And they're like, really? I go, I watch people for a living.
I pay attention to like feet and hips and all the time. I notice that stuff.
It's like I go from your feet and I go to your head, like, oh, you got a haircut. Yeah. You got a beard trim. Yep. And they're like, how did you notice that? It's like, well, my job is to watch you move, and like I can be driving down by Town Lake and I can see like someone's run gait out of the corner of my eye and I go, oh, that's so-and-so, because you watch them run so often. So
yeah, it's crazy.
It is an interesting, a profession. You own the gym, and so you can just watch. And it's also, you're observing a community as well. And like for a lot of people, I think, that come to the gym, especially right now and post-COVID, a lot of them are working from home.
Yeah.
Right. So like, if they have a wife and kids, especially, like coming to the gym is their social interaction, right? You have an 8-hour workday behind a computer. You got wife, kids to tend to, dinner, household chores. And if you come here for that 1 hour, that's kind of like your social activity, Not so much if you're a 27-year-old software sales guy and you're going downtown the weekends and all that. But for a lot of people, like this is their opportunity to come in and like socialize and be a part of something that's, aside from the family. And so you get to see like, friendships develop, relationships develop. Like we were talking about Tim Otto the other day. It was just like, just the trucks. So you see, oh my God, like, and now like you're throwing out. And so it is nice because I think you mentioned earlier the community idea. And at some point, me and Todd had kind of talked about the idea of, well, if we change this and make this easier for more people, it can make more money. Mm-hmm. But then it wouldn't be fun anymore. We wouldn't be training the kind of people we want to train. We wouldn't have established the community we've established. And you would kind of just be catering to the lowest common denominator. Like, and also you're kind of like, I think in a way you're selling lies. Yeah. Like, come train here, you'll lose weight. Yeah. It's like, I can't promise you that. If you come train here, I can promise you get stronger and faster if you come 4 days a week. Like, I can promise that, but I can't promise you're going to lose weight. I have no control what you're doing outside the gym, no control of your lifestyle. So I think like, that this fork in the road of like, hey, and that's common marketing,
right?
Find, like I had one guy explain it to me. It was like, find the wound and stick your finger in it. Yep. Was what he said. You know, he was like, are you tired of being fat and out of shape? It's like, I'm never gonna put that on anything, right? Because it's like I don't want to work with people who aren't motivated to train. I want to work with people who are like, hey, I want to go here because I don't care what people think how I look. I was like, I just want to be more capable.
Right.
Like to me, that's something that like then you come to the right spot. If you email me and say, what program is going to give me a 6-pack or something, I'm like, zero interest in working with you.
Right.
I was like, man, like you need to seriously do some online research or just read a book or two about how the body works. And then if you want to get stronger and faster, come talk to me. Yeah.
Well, that's what I love about Atomic is that you guys stay so true to who you are, and I, as a business owner, as a gym owner, I got caught into exactly what you talked about, the mistake of wanting to be everything to everybody, wanting to be a people pleaser who and it wasn't coming from a bad place. It was just really, and then what happened to me was then I ended up owning a business that I hated.
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy going there. The culture, it wasn't an extension of who I was. And my observation of Atomic, and one of the reasons why I come and train here is that it's clear to me that, you know, you guys are unapologetically who you are.
Yeah.
And if you're not down with it, it's cool. No hard feelings. This just isn't your place.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, I think as a business owner, I mean, like there's two kind of conversations you have to have, right? Like ultimately a business is designed to make money.
Right.
And there are definitely like proven ways to make money. And I mean, the question is, do you want to own a boutique hamburger store or that makes one of the best burgers around, but it's not that busy? Or do you want to own a McDonald's?
Right.
One is going to make clearly more money than the other, you know? And unless you get that sweet spot, which I think we're starting to kind of get there, where it's like, we're kind of now the hamburger boutique spot that is actually profitable and making money and doing really well. But like, I mean, when you first start a gym or you first start a business, like your main goal is to make it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, like I just need to make, I need to pay the bills. I need to hopefully can pay myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and like you throw debt in the equation. If you like, you know, get some capital, it's like, that's even more stressful. And so I think it's very common at a certain juncture to be like, hey, what can I do to make it? You know, and we had these same conversations, you know, people were like, oh, you need to do a body transformation challenge. You're like, that's not who we are, you know? And so I think at some point, like it was easy for us because we were all single guys who had no debt and we're totally cool living Spartan lifestyles. Right. Like if we were married and we had one or two children each, it would have been a whole different thing. Like Atomic could have turned out to be completely different. But instead, it's me and Todd sharing, you know, alternating between efficiency and going to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, working for another guy, you know, loading equipment out of a Suburban. You know, like that was like the roots of how it started. And then I think the first time I met you was at one of our first locations.
Yeah.
At like a fundraiser for Mustaches or something like that. But we were in a position to where we could postpone success or delay success. It was nothing like, there was no ticking time bomb of like, hey, my kids need braces, you know, like I got to make this much money to cover the house I bought, whatever it may be. I mean, we were living in shitty apartments, driving shitty cars. So
right.
It was a lot less stressful than some people find themselves in.
Well, are you like me where I had a similar situation. So the way that I started Fortitude was I had this old Land Cruiser that I had all this equipment piled into the back of it.
Go to the park.
I had a tractor tire like tied to the top, you know, and like at that moment, it was like, when I was doing it, it was, I still look back on that time as like, I was having so much fun. I was loving what I was doing. And, you know, now it's like success, you know, quote unquote success. I'm still reaching for that feeling again.
Yes.
You know, of loving what I was doing.
Yeah. I mean, I said we were at one point, I think it was before we had a physical location. We would both be bartending on Friday night, closing the bar at 2 a.m., getting home at 4 a.m. We would meet the track at 8 a.m. So we're going to bed 4:30, right? Waking up at 7, going to the track, and one of us would coach and one would train to kind of like set the example.
Sure.
You know? And then at that point, we were obviously younger. So we're like late 20s, early 30s, single and whatnot. And so then it was like, well, let's go to brunch afterwards. So we go to brunch afterwards, you know, and you have a few drinks. And then, you know, we had to go back to the bar Saturday evening and we'd work again. And so like our weekends were like extremely taxing. Like to me, like you gave me one weekend like that now, I'd be like, I'm tapping out. I'm out. But I mean, at that point, like for us, you know, A, drinking wasn't that painful the next day. And B, we were so into training.
Yes.
You know, like, I mean, like now at a certain point, you get to a point where like training's kind of like brushing your teeth. You're like, I just need to do it.
Yeah.
It's part of my job professionally. I need to lead by example. I need to take care of my body and be healthy. But like, you know, I don't derive the same satisfaction I did 10, 15 years ago from like the training process,
Sure.
You know? In other endeavors, yes. In the gym, not as much. Like shooting, I know Jordan does it with jiu-jitsu right now. It's kind of like a new change. Like you're shifting over a different kind of training, seeing the rapid results of consistent training and really enjoying the progress you make. But yeah, now it's like, you know, training in the gym, it's kind of like, hey, this is who I am.
Right.
I brush my teeth in the mornings, you know, I do A, B, and C, and then I have to train X number of times per week, you know, because I have to like maintain this standard. So.
Yeah. What is it? What I really love learning about people is what are the things that they do habitually as a practice that that basically facilitate their success.
Mm-hmm.
You know, are there things that you do that are kind of non-negotiable, or you try to fit in as much as possible because you know they make you better?
I'd say one thing probably would be anytime I don't want to do something, or anytime I like, oh man, it sucks, or I'm kind of feeling sorry for myself, whatever it may be. I mean, it doesn't matter how tough you are, you had those moments.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm like, I kind of think about like the brand and like the gym, you know, and the gym's motto, the gym has kind of changed a little bit, like the old motto, stronger, faster, harder to kill. And we use that a lot. You know, now we're kind of more like, hey, let's train smart. Let's be disciplined with our training. But ultimately it's kind of like, well, what would I tell my athletes if they came in? Like, they're like, oh, I don't want to do sandbag get-ups, or you know, it's like, hey man, like this is what you signed up for.
Right.
You know, like if you don't want to do that, then go to Gold's Gym, you know, and you can do all the arm curls you want, and you could, you know, walk on the treadmill and listen to the pop music, you know, it's just, so I think for me, just kind of like, because of the brand that we've created, it holds me accountable on a daily basis.
Right.
You know, where it's like, I got to come in here and train. Like, it's like, I came in, I think it was Sunday. I taught a class in that morning. I was like, I have to train. Like, I have to do the programming because I need to be familiar with it. I need to be proficient in it, and the lifts, and I still need to be able to lead from the front. So I think that's one component. Personally, not so much in line with the gym is I try to just be like, I guess, appreciative of like the situation I'm in.
Yeah.
And nothing is really that big a deal. You know, if something goes wrong at the gym, like, and a lot of times I'll have a conversation with an athlete. They do something that goes against the culture of the gym. And it's like, I don't yell. I don't get mad. It doesn't even really bother me that much. But I'll pull them aside and be like, hey man, like, this is how we do things. And if you don't like it, I'm more than happy to refund your money and you can go somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know, and I think just having that kind of like adult mindset and talking to people, like not trying to dress them down. I think me and you had a conversation earlier about like, you know, poor leadership and, you know, getting dressed down.
Right.
And the point is, you know, the gym that we have now has very successful people in it. I mean, to pay roughly $200 or more a month, you have to make decent money, you know? And so everyone is good at something who comes here. You know, I don't know how many trust fund kids are out in our gym training right now. Most people have earned their money and they have the discretionary income to pay for a premium service. And so you just have a very honest, upfront conversation with them. You're like, hey, like this is how we do things here. And you understand that? And they go, like, yes. And it's like, okay, so you understand that if you don't want to do things the way we do, then I'm more than happy to like refund, even if it's, you know, 2 weeks in or whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's other places that provide a service that may be more appropriate for you. It's not personal. It's just like an honest conversation with someone. And so whenever things pop up like that, I think to me, it helps like just address it like very upfront, very clear, non-emotional.
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt my feelings. I'm not angry at you, but understand like we have to do things a certain way to maintain who we are. And like I've had those conversations with multiple people before.
You know, I'm assuming that's also your staff and your coaches.
Yeah,
you know, sometimes
absolutely. Yeah.
have those conversations need to be had. You know, this is like, it's how we do things. And when you're a representative of the organization, like when I'm doing development with my coaches, and it's the same as yours because I've trained here.
Mm-hmm.
When that coach is in front of the class, they are the entire business.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, they literally represent everything that you stand for,
Yes.
and they are the steward of your mission, your purpose, and your vision. And so it's massively important that they're on point. And I can tell by the professionalism of your coaches, you guys do a lot of development on the back end.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the guys too that coach for us, you know, it's like, it's a pride point because a physical test is very hard for one. You know, it's like, okay, hey, you're a stud if you can pass this test. And then they do go through the academic portion and the practical portion online. So it's not easy to be a coach here. And even if, I don't care if you have a PhD in kinesiology and you can do all these things and say all this stuff, it's like, you still have to go through our process and prove that, hey, you can run a class. I mean, running even a session of 25, 30-year-olds, it's like a kindergarten class.
Right.
You have to be able to manage people. And, you know, the bottom line is a lot of us don't have, you know, very long attention spans just with media, life, and all this. And so you have to manage that group. You have to set expectations. You have to keep the flow going. You have to have like, you know, it has to be a smooth experience. And one thing business-wise, because I think, we talk about business a lot, is that we've created something that is very difficult to replicate again and again and again, because it's just really reliant upon certain individuals and a certain skill set. I always go back to this hamburger analogy, right? But it's like, you can train anyone to make a hot dotty burger, and you go there for the burger. You don't go for the server.
Right.
You don't go there for the cook. You don't go there for the bartender. Like, you go to eat that burger, and like showing someone how to make that hamburger is not that challenging.
Right.
What's that, a 30 or 40 minute, block of instruction? Showing someone how to properly express the culture of the gym and have a technical background in exercise science and physiology, and then also compose themselves well in a group of, 20 to 30 adult professionals who can be doctors, pharmacists, lawyers, senior military personnel. It's like, that's a challenge to replicate those individuals. And that's something that kind of limits the growth as well.
Right. Yeah.
Gold's Gym or 24-hour Anytime Fitness, those are like cookie cutter models that you can reproduce very easily.
Right.
And so, like, from a business perspective, it's kind of like, man, like, this is kind of hard to do again unless one of us completely leaves and tries to go through that whole process.
Yeah, that's the thing where, and I still live and die by this as a gym owner. But what I always say is the product is the coaching. Like, I know that some people, and every gym does it a little different. Some people will say, well, the product is the programming, which I don't disagree with. But I've chosen to say the product is the coaching, and that creates, like what you said, it creates a real tenuous situation, because if a coach leaves, if that coach just gets a shitty attitude all of a sudden, or like decline, it creates a variable that's hard to manage.
And especially if you have coaches who work certain times and you lock athletes into certain coaches, that's their coach.
Right.
So we always kind of change our schedule up. So like, if you come to our gym, you really don't have a coach.
Right.
And I've known, gyms in town who had like set up a model where it was like, you train in so-and-so's class only.
Right.
And you're locked in. When that coach leaves, they all follow that coach to somewhere else,
It works until it doesn't.
Yeah. And then luckily for us, we only have the 3 full-time coaches are the owner operators. And then everyone else is like, they have a career and a life outside the gym. And then this is like their little escape place to go and train and hang out and see friends and get paid, get to be a coach. It's like a little moonlighting kind of gig for the other coaches. And so it worked out pretty well for us.
Yeah.
The hard part is when you have less control over coaches, then it's harder to develop them. Like we have a straight up employee and like you're in charge of his week. That's where you can really start to push development and all that. But when you have like our situation where it's kind of more coaches coming in, it's like, hey, like you have a wife, you have a kid, you have a career, it's like just trying to get all our staff together can be very challenging.
Right.
Sometimes.
Just get them in one place at the same time.
Like, okay, like so-and-so's here, so-and-so's here, so-and-so has this. Like, no, my kid's sick. And you're just like, I just need to get all you guys in one room for like 30 minutes. And it's so challenging.
Yeah. I deal with the same thing. So I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah. No, it's just,
Yeah. The podcast, or what I say, we really talk about on the podcast are optimal health, deep human connections, and self-actualization. Those are kind of the 3 tenets of it. What of those 3 things are kind of like resonating with you? Like, what resonates with you? I'll say them again: optimal health, deep human connection, and self-actualization.
I'd lean towards deep human connection, just because I think there's always going to be something special that is created through suffering.
Yeah.
Whether that is a backcountry trip, whether it's a military selection, or whether it's that daily grind of coming in. Like you now have something you share.
Yeah.
And it's not so much from a coach's perspective of connecting with an athlete. It's more the athletes all sharing that experience on the floor of like looking at something that they don't want to do, and then being like, well, he's going to do it. So I'm going to do it as well. And he's working really hard. So I'm going to try to work just as hard. And I think like that really is, and it's not going to be like across the gym. You're going to find like 1 or 2 people, maybe even 3 or 4 that you connect with. And like now they're your training partners.
Right.
You saw it in your gym. You've probably had, think of I mean, how many friends do you have who you've never done something hard with? You know, not you know,
Well,
like
I mean,
friends.
From,
you know?
yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah,
for
like,
sure.
I mean, like all my best friends are training partners.
Yep.
In jujitsu or in the gym or hunting partners or military guys that we've just been like hammered. Like we have a shared connection. And I think to me that shared like challenge or strenuous event is much deeper than like we got wasted a few times.
Yeah.
And a lot of people's friends are just drinking buddies.
Right.
They're drinking buddies that hang out on the weekends. They really don't even know each other. They don't know how they're going to react in an adverse environment. But it's like when I have this crew out here on the gym floor, and it's like, I mean, I've seen women that it's like, dude, I'd go to combat with her.
Yeah.
She's got zero fucking quit, right? She'll grit her teeth. She'll work through extremely hard things. And I've seen plenty of guys who are special forces guys who do the same exact thing and just get broken. It's like, well, man, this is breaking you. What's going to happen when it gets real? You know? And so I'd probably say that second one probably resonates the most to me. And then also I think it really helps to, you know, my original mentor, he made the comment one time, I think you're too close to your athletes. Because he was very much like, you know, I'm the college football team coach and I'm going to like talk down to all of them. They're going to do exactly what I say. And I don't agree with that. I feel like I have a really strong connection with a lot of my athletes, especially the ones who trained consistently over time. And I see them work through things, see them make physical breakthroughs, see them make aesthetic, you know, breakthroughs by coming in one way. And then 2 or 3 years later, they look completely different. Their confidence is different. So yeah, I'd say that second one probably resonates with me.
What is it about suffering? Yeah, because I agree with you. Like there's that, and probably why there's the brotherhood of, you know, brother and sisterhood of military.
Yeah.
You know, but what do you think it is about that suffering that really creates that connection?
Well, I think it's a shared experience that is challenging. It's not challenging to get wasted. You just sit at a bar and drink. I mean.
Right.
You know, and so like, yes, like you're sharing an experience with someone like partying or, you know, going out. But it's not like challenging. Like you didn't have to really earn that last shot of whatever it is. You just paid for it.
Right.
Paid for it. You didn't even get it yourself. You paid, someone got it for you, you know?
Right.
But I think having to get out there and like earn that, you know, 70th sandbag get up or that, you know, 17th mile or whatever it may be, whatever the endeavor may be, that 30th day and, you know, mountain phase, ranger school, whatever it may be. I think that like you have to really want something to get there.
Yeah.
And I mean, to me, it just kind of, it like trims the fat, you know, it just removes the bad eggs. It just, it shows like, hey, like, although you may like this kind of music or this kind of food, or you might be male, female, wherever you're from, it's like, we have a commonality now. Like you have some grit.
Right.
And it all really comes down to what you respect. You know, some people don't really respect grit. They may respect entrepreneurship or financial success or your influence on social media, right? You know, it's like social media influencers, most people don't even know who they are.
Right.
Like they've never actually met that person. They don't know if that person is even the same person they present on social media.
Right.
And I know people who are influencers and I'm like, wow, like you are so much less cool in person. It blows my mind how uncool you are. But on social media, you like provide this image and persona that's like, oh, wow, you know? And so after experiencing that a few times, I wonder how many of those people actually are like legit, like hardworking, amazing people. Or do they just produce content that is entertaining and makes people like them, you know?
Sure.
So
yeah, I think there's something when we're talking about deep human connection. I think there's something about the rawness of or the exposure of being vulnerable, like putting yourself on the line. Together collectively, like risking failure, and getting to witness somebody risking failure, making themselves vulnerable, potentially crashing and burning.
Yeah.
And then getting to do that in somewhat of a public forum that we get to share.
Yeah.
Like you said, that bond is like, okay, I see you, man. Like I see what I see what you're about.
And then you see them do it again and they don't break. And so that's progress. That's them moving forward. That's them becoming stronger. And I think a lot of people hesitate to put themselves in those positions. I'll use a military example. I started shooting USPSA pretty recently. And you know, I was like, oh, I know how to shoot a gun. You know, I go to my USPSA match and there's some Bubba who probably can't run from the first bay to the last bay, just wrecking me with this pistol, you know? And so that's a great example. I think a lot of like military guys out there who are like influencers and they say and talk all this stuff, but they won't even go to a local USPSA match because they will get wrecked by a dentist, a plumber, an electrician will be out there, you know, and all they do on the weekends is go shoot matches and they will get wrecked. But because they are who they are, a Navy SEAL, a Special Forces guy, whatever it may be, they're like, I can't go there. And they'll talk smack on it, right? But in reality, they're just scared to put themselves out there. And if they did put themselves out there, they'd be in a position where they could improve. I mean, I started shooting and it was like, wow, I'm the worst shooter in the squad right now.
Yeah.
Even though I have a special operations background, you know? But then you start to see yourself kind of move up the rankings and shoot more proficiently. And that, I think, seeing that progress is like, that is where you want to grow. And recently we made an announcement in the gym that currency, the only currency is effort.
Yes.
Right. And so it's like, I'm not impressed by the guy who, you know, was a D1 decathlete who comes in and wins a work capacity. I'm not, it doesn't impress me at all.
You
I expect that, you know? But then seeing someone show up and get totally destroyed their first day. 3 months later, they're not the last person. 9 months later, they're middle of the pack. A year and a half later, they're in the front of the pack. And then one day they win a work capacity. Like, to me, like that's what I want to see. Someone who is willing to be vulnerable, get broken off, and then grow from it.
Yeah, I think it's a mark of a successful person is the willingness and the ability to humble yourself to be the novice, to be the beginner in new things, which is why I really appreciate things like what you guys all do, like, you know, you jujitsu, you know, you go and do Muay Thai. Like, it's like, okay, yeah, you're a badass strength conditioning coach. You're a ranger. But are you willing to become the student, to be the guy the white belt?
Yeah. What's that analogy is, you're the biggest fish in your pond.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, oh, I'm the big fish in this pond. Like, if you're the biggest fish in your pond, and you need to find a new pond.
Right.
Because you're not going to grow. You're not going to, you're not going to be pushed, you know? And I think at any point, if you're kind of satisfied with like where you're at, then it's like, man, like it's time to be like, hey, am I as good as I think I am?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, why don't you go find out?
Yeah.
You know, like, why don't you put your money where your mouth is and then go see how good you are, you know?
Yeah, I think it's also a result of, you mentioned community is something we've mentioned several times in this conversation. And we've all heard the saying is that you're the product of the 5 people you spend your most time with.
Yeah.
So like, what are those people telling you?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
What are they encouraging you to do? Are they saying, no, you just be comfortable, man? Like, you're good at what you do. Just rest on your laurels, you know? Or are they telling you like, no, fuck that, man. Like, you're great at what you do. You need to go do something where you suck at it.
Yes.
You know, like what are those people talking to you about, you know? And so I think that's really important, which again speaks to the community you've created here.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a conversation with one of my coaches one time. He was, obviously he was a good athlete and he did well in the gym. And he was talking down to some athletes at one point. And I go, hey man, like, you're good at this. This is what you do. You should be good at it, right? This is like your chosen profession. You've been doing this type of stuff for a long time. You have to understand that dude over there is really good at what he does. This is just not what he does, right? So you can like talk down to him like he's like a piece of shit, right? But you have to understand that if you stepped into his world, whether it's finance or real estate or medicine, it's like you would be a complete failure and a complete idiot. You know,
he'd be talking shit about you.
Yeah, like you would be the laughing stock of the organization. You know, and it was like, man, like you have to understand that just because they're not good at what you enjoy, doesn't mean you can talk to them that way. You know, and I think that's a really important thing. So I would say there are certain things that universally people respect. Martial prowess. Everyone respects someone who can fight.
Yes.
They're going to be like, ooh, I mean, like, look at the UFC, right? They're going to respect intimidation and size. Large, muscular men, or usually other men are going to be like, ooh, financial success is one thing, right? So there's certain things that people just like respect more than like, I'm the best plumber in Austin. Right. It's like, well, I mean, that's respectable, you know? I mean, or the best oral surgeon or whatever. You know, like those are respectable things that possibly require a whole lot more work than being the best fighter or the best runner or the best. So I think at a certain point, like, you know, the nice thing about the military is everyone is in the same, they're all on the same level, right? You have basic training, same haircuts, same outfits, no rank. It's kind of the same on a gym floor. It's like, doesn't matter who's on the gym floor, if it's a CEO or, you know, a barista. It's like, you know, that guy's not in charge of you. Doesn't matter. He may be like the biggest guy in his company, but in here, it's all even, you know? Sure. And so, yeah, it is kind of interesting. And I think what happens is individuals who are extremely successful in their individual realms come here, and then they're all of a sudden held accountable by a coach or their peers. You know, no one's going to hold the CEO accountable, really. Right. Maybe the shareholders, right? Right. At a company, it's like whatever he says goes. And if he's got a temper or he's a poor leader, doesn't matter. He says it, he can fire you. But he comes in here, he says something to one of my coaches. My coach is like, hey, dude, you can get the F out. Right. You know, it's like he's just not used to being talked like that. And I think after a certain point, a lot of men, they do seek that, you know, accountability by peers or by people they respect. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a lost art. One of the things I loved about the units I served in the military was the willingness of everybody to just tell you exactly how it was. Yeah. Like, hey man, like you're acting like a piece of shit right now. Yeah. Yeah. And I love you. I'm just telling you right now, like cut that shit out. Yeah. Yeah. And it was no hard feelings. Like, oh, thanks, man. Like, and it was, you know, some guys would get defensive or whatever. Yes. Yeah. But I miss, I aspire to be more like this, because in the civilian world, it's a little harder. Yeah. Like if I talk to my coaches like that, I'd probably lose a bunch of them. But I still desire to be a straight shooter. Yes. And to be like, hey, like you sucked at that. Yeah. That wasn't good. Yeah. Well, the funny thing about that is a lot of people will, like, they'll ask for constructive criticism. They really don't want it. Right. They just want to hear that they're good. They want to be patted on the back. Yeah. You know, so I mean, a couple of times we have done that where it's like, hey, like come back with some feedback of each other and this and that. And a lot of times it was just kind of like, it's like, come on, man, you have to have something, man, you know? And I think finally we got to a point, I think there's probably some frustration on some individuals' parts where they actually finally were like giving feedback, and it was like, oh, like, thank you. Like, that's what I need to hear. And now that you say it, yes, that's true, you know? But a lot of people are like, oh, I'm open to feedback. They get feedback, they're immediately defensive. Well, that guy doesn't know, or this, or you do this. It's like, no. I mean, like I'm not saying you're bad at your job. I'm just saying like if you ask for feedback, you should be willing to take it. You know, and I think a lot of grown men, you know, they say they're open to it, but they're not. Yeah. You know, it's just they get too defensive. Well, it hurts the ego, you know? Yeah. You know, so does watching a 4-year-old ski down the hill faster than you. You know? Which is my truth every time I'm skiing. Humble pie, man. Yeah. You got to get that slice of humble pie pretty regularly. Well, what's going on around the gym that people should know about? Anything you guys got coming up, or you know, anything you want to make sure the audience hears about? Well, I mean, I think, you know, we try to the gym's kind of an artificial environment, you know. It's I mean, unless you're a competitive exerciser, the gym's nothing really tangible and real happens in the gym. It's a controlled training environment to do things better, you know, whether that's how to deal with your spouse, whether that's a military selection, whether it's climbing a mountain, a race, whatever it may be. And so one thing we like to let our athletes kind of know, because I remember the first backcountry trip I did outside the military, I went with like, you know, 3 of the most studly men I knew, and like everyone kind of got broke, you know? And so like we do the Forge every summer. Yeah. And like the idea is like, let's get out of the controlled environment and let's go somewhere and actually kind of test it out altitude with a whole different environment, a little more of an uncontrolled environment. Yeah. And so the Forge is one thing that every summer we look forward to. It's a great excuse to get out of Texas because it's hot. But we get to take people who are all, you know, typically very successful and have a wide array of experiences, and take them and have them do something never done before, which is sleep in the backcountry, you know, for 4 nights and spend 5 days doing land navigation. So stuff that me and you have done and love, and get to share that with people is like really cool, because oftentimes when we're in the backcountry, we're doing something, you know, if it's work or if it's hunting or whatever it may be. If you're a climber, you're trying to climb a mountain and like on a certain time frame.
but just getting back there and getting to share that and put people in like a whole new experience and seeing them struggle and succeed is awesome. So that's something that we got coming up this summer. We got 12 women already locked down. The men's group will get announced pretty soon. And this will be the 7th and 8th trip that we've taken back there. So that's pretty fun.
I'm definitely waiting for that men's trip because I'm going to jump on that myself.
It's good. It's everything you wanted the military to be.
Yeah.
Is what it is. It's like, oh, you get some great instruction. We're in a beautiful place. But hey, we can drink whiskey by the fire. You know?
Yeah.
So it's like all those times where you're somewhere really cool. You're like, man, this would be really neat. There was a fire and we had the whiskey and we were all laughing. You know, like that's kind of what the Forge ends up being.
Yeah.
The hard parts, but the fun part.
Yeah. So for everyone listening who maybe follow Atomic Athlete on Instagram, we'll talk about that in just a second, but they have these awesome, like real life, like, instructional classes that they give there where it might be self-defense or it might be like how to, recently you guys did a medical one where it was like,
we got the Vanguard this weekend, which is butchery, edge weapons, striking, grappling, shooting, trauma. And so that's like a 6 or 7 module, weekend kind of event.
So it's like taking everything, like you said, the gym is like a controlled, safe, it's the lab.
Yeah.
And it takes everything out of the lab and it puts things into like a more real world environment and then applicable of all those physical traits and mental traits that you're developing in the gym.
Yeah.
So I love that you guys do that.
Yeah, that's and we don't teach that. Like, I mean, I teach certain blocks, like navigation.
You facilitate it though.
Yeah, we set it up. Yeah, we bring in people who are really good at it. Once again, like we're not going to rest on our laurels and say, I did this and I did that and I can teach this. It's like, yeah, I could teach you how to put a tourniquet on and pack a wound. And
CLS training.
Yeah. I mean, I can do all that kind of stuff, but it's like, why not bring someone who's got 20 years professional experience in, emergency medicine? Why not bring a world champion in and teach grappling, or a competitive fighter and teach striking, or a full-time professional butcher to teach the butchery? These are all things that I can do on my own. I do them every year, whether it's hunting or training or whatever, but it's like, there's just, like, you can't have an ego. There's better people out there than me to teach these things.
I mean, that's a full conversation that we maybe not be able to get into right now, but like there's really something to be said about, like you said, checking your ego, and letting experts people who are experts in their field kind of do their thing, rather than you trying to. I got in trouble with that with business in the beginning. Like I wanted to be center stage and I wanted to look so important and so knowledgeable. And I really just end up like, being mediocre.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think at this juncture, it's like when you're on a business, right? Like the key personnel typically are going to be the ones who understand it the best. But like if I could just go in the mountains and like have like pass it on to someone else to run, then that would be amazing. Just find the right candidate's hard,
Right.
And each time we get close, I think, to having someone, then it's kind of like their path diverges or something like that. So, because we're all getting older, so it's like we kind of need that next generation to come in and pick up where we're leaving off of like, okay, hey, I'm 28, 29, I'm fit, I'm motivated, I'm interested in this. And then it's like trying to have that like next generation of coaches come through.
Well, you're raising them right now.
Yeah, we're trying.
Yeah.
We're trying. We'll see what happens.
Well, I want to wrap us up with where I started. I'm so grateful for what you guys do. I've deeply appreciated just being a member of your gym while I'm here in Austin, and I'm on these orders, and I'm just trying to stay fit and healthy myself. You've created a great platform, which I really appreciate, and I'm just really inspired by what you guys are doing. So I'm just really thankful for you guys.
Yeah, we love having you guys. All the guys you brought over were just great.
Yeah, all the Fortitude people.
Yeah, they're awesome. They're awesome. It's funny when they first came, they're kind of like, but then like once they like, started talking to the people, talking to the coaches, they felt comfortable. It's like Ritter there today, he's so great, man.
He's amazing.
He is so great. It was like So, hey, you want the instructions for the tie-dye shirts? He goes, oh no, I know how to do this. I was like, oh, tell me why you know how to do this so well, And, so it's great to get to know all those people.
Yeah, it's just very mild differences, but I think the good thing is I think culturally, again, because of the military background thing, but I think a lot of things were very similar for those guys. And so I'm grateful for you guys taking care of my people and, well, thanks for being on the show. Everybody, this is Jake Saenz. We will put in the notes we'll put their Instagram page, we'll put their website. If we mentioned any books in here, I'll make sure I put them in the notes for so you guys can check them out. You mentioned one book earlier, which I'll go back through the video and talk about it. But yeah,
awesome, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Hell yeah.